Okay. Yeah, I chose forgiveness. It just occurred to me, because I didn't even add this. First of all, there are about 5 major areas in my life that have required years of working on forgiveness. But it occurred to me that the person I work on forgiving daily is myself. And most of it is just for being human, but I'm also much better at that than I was at one time. So anyways, we obviously don't have time to go through all the 5 areas, so I'm just gonna do the beginning, my mom and dad. And at the end, I told Susan I'm gonna tell you my story first, and then there's a sheet of why it's necessary to forgive, the realizations you have to have before it can even happen, and the actions you can take. So I'm leaving this with Susan to make copies for anybody who would like to take that with you. Okay, so I will try to hurry this along because I think it's a little longer than I thought I had.
It's all right.
We're all
It's
good.
all right.
Okay.
We're all good. Just
Okay,
let
thank you.
spirit move.
Thank you.
Yes.
So starting at the beginning with my mom, never any words of love, never any hugs for me, but very hands-on with my brothers, which was always confusing and hurtful. And I grew up wondering if she even loved me. I told my dolls around the age of 8 that when I grew up, my kids were never going to wonder if their mother loved them, and I held true to that. My dad began grooming me at the age of 8 to sexually abuse me, which happened through the age of 9, until he became fearful that I would tell my mother. From the outside, we were a typical Michigan small-town, middle-class family, piano teacher mother, factory worker father, church on a regular basis. Then when I was 16, I woke up. I sat straight up in bed, because you know how we can compartmentalize things and just kind of push them to the side. And I realized what my dad had done, and immediately began years of seething hatred for him. So I went on to leave home, graduate from college, moved to California with my soon-to-be husband, and 3 years later we had our first child. As musicians, we were hired to tour Ireland for a month, performing Gypsy and Godspell, which was very exciting at the time. And during this month, my mom took care of my 3-year-old daughter. When we got back out of the clear blue, she asked if my dad had ever tried anything with me. It seems she had read a magazine article talking about how many young girls go through this, but she didn't really think anything had ever happened. Now, I had decided long ago not to bring it up unless she did, but if she did, I was not going to lie. And so she and my dad were divorced by this time, and her reaction was absolute devastation. She wanted to know when it could happen because she worked at home. And I said, when you were at choir practice and church. So she went through a tailspin of spiritual and emotional trauma for months. And I felt sorry. I felt sorry for her pain, but not for being truthful. That was one time she put her arms around me when she left, said she loved me as her guard was down, and she was emotionally shattered at the time, but it didn't last. So in 1981, after moving to 2 other states for work opportunities, my ex and I settled back in California. I immediately called back to Unity Village and said, where's the closest Unity church? Because I had been reading Daily Word for about 8 years, and I knew that this was the philosophy in the church that I wanted to make my own. And they told me South Bay Unity, and I was an active member there for 30 years until they closed in 2019, which Susan and I are still not happy about. Trish O'Connor was the minister, and a bond began that went from minister to mentor to confidant to friend and surrogate mother until her death at 90. I knew that the hatred for my dad needed to be spiritually and emotionally healed. Trish began working with me along with a therapist. I confronted my dad through a letter, and amazingly, he wrote back saying he had been dreading this for years. Sent me a $2,000 check to cover the cost of the therapy, said whatever I needed for the rest of my life just to let him know, and ended up begging for my forgiveness. As divine order would have it, my dad partnered up with the sweetest woman, Penny, whose sister lived in the South Bay, that she came to visit for 2 weeks every year. So now that they were together, they came together and dropped by to see me. And although I was continuing to work on forgiving him, I still didn't want any close physical contact. I did not. And also my daughter was 9 at the time, and I just ached looking at her and feeling for 9-year-old Charla. The second year, I witnessed how much affection was between Dad and Penny, which I'd never seen between him and Mom, and it felt just very sweet to look at. The third year, it felt okay to quickly hug him goodbye. And by the fourth year, I was totally comfortable with longer hugs, kisses on the cheek, and we enjoyed a loving relationship until his death at 93. In the meantime, Mom had started visiting after I gave her grandkids, and we settled into an amicable Michigan to California relationship. I had also confronted her, but much more gently, sharing how I felt regarding the lack of verbal and physical affection throughout my growing up. She knew I was going through therapy, and so she kind of, was wanting to know what was happening. I also assured her that as an adult, I could see that she showered me with love in other ways. Piano lessons, healthy meals, birthday parties, Christmas presents, Easter baskets, shopping for prom dresses, etc., etc., etc. However, she was not happy that I had forgiven my dad and said that I could not love her if I loved him. Oh. So she made the decision to cut me out of her life, saying that her life was better off without me in it, making her actually lifelong rejection complete. For months, I begged her to reconsider, wrote letters, sent her articles on forgiveness. She wouldn't budge. So during past visits, my mom had met Trish, because I had taken her to church, and I realized later became very threatened by our relationship. She most likely surmised that during counseling I had shared my issues with both her and my dad. And Trish knew I was working on reconnecting with Mom, but after months of watching my pain, she finally said, "Charla, maybe it's time to stop trying to fix this. There's something I need to tell you. This is the kicker. Your mom called me last year and said that you had pulled the wool over all of our eyes. You were not the nice person the church thought you were. Not to believe anything you said, because you didn't know the difference between the truth and a lie." Whew. It turns out that Trish was livid listening to her. But she waited almost a year to tell me because she was supporting me trying to make a connection and have some kind of a love relationship. But as you can imagine, after hearing this, I walked around feeling like I had a knife in my back for months. my dad well established, it was time to tackle this humongous one. I could only strive for peace within. I didn't even want a relationship with my mom after this. You know, that was too damaging. Mom is 94 now. She still lives in Michigan, happily married to a minister. I mean, it's just, anyway. And I think, helps him write his sermons on love, And still has no desire for a relationship with me. But looking back, I have to say that God was always at work, giving me 2 surrogate mothers in Trish and Penny, who loved me to their dying days. So I say thank you, God, unity, and all who supported me through these paths of forgiveness. I am forever grateful. So this is the sheet, and I can get through this pretty quickly. So what is the process of forgiveness? First, these realizations. Forgiveness isn't, and I know a lot of you already know all of this, but I know all of this too, but I still need to remind myself. Okay, so what is the process of forgiveness? The realization that forgiveness is not for the other person, it's for you. And it's the greatest gift you can give yourself. Forgiveness is giving up the hope that the past could have been different. Forgiveness is setting a prisoner free and discovering that the prisoner was you. True forgiveness is when you can think of a situation without pain. But I have found, and this is probably the hardest to do, the ultimate forgiveness is when you can be thankful for the experience because it helped to make you a better person because of what you learned from it. So the actions that I was taught and that I take are, number 1, ask God to help you. Ask God to help you forgive. Each time a resentment or a past hurt comes to mind, no matter how many times or how long it takes. Forgive everything on a daily basis, anything that happened that day, anything that anybody said that you didn't like or anything that happened, every night before you go to sleep, forgive. One of the things that Trish taught me was to say the Lord's Prayer inserting that person's name.
Wow.
Let's say the person's name is John. John's Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Give John his daily bread. Lead John not into temptation. Forgive John his trespasses as you have forgiven John.
Wow.
This really helped me a lot. Remember Christ's words, forgive them, Father, for they know not what they do. I love the saying that hurt people hurt people. I've expanded that a little bit to say that hurt people go on to hurt people. And this helps you to have compassion. My dad had been told by his dad that that's what daughters were for. And my mom had grown up in a rather cold household. So, the more you know, the more you understand. It may not happen overnight, but with regular practice, I promise you, it gets easier and easier until it's just a habit. It's just a habit. Not only to forgive, but to release the other person to their highest good with love. So my favorite quote is, to know all is to understand all. To understand all is to forgive all. To forgive all is to love all. So I want you to close your eyes. And you can either repeat it after me or to yourselves, each phrase. Through the Christ in me, I have the power to forgive. The love of God now penetrates to the depths of my being. I forgive myself. And release anything I regret. And I am now able to forgive all others. And so it is. So another little thing that Trish taught us was to take the word forgive and say that forgive is to give it up for something better.
Wow. Nice.
Okay? To give it up for something better. And then I found one that kind of made me chuckle, and it says, always forgive your enemies because nothing annoys them more.